This is one of the most competitive rosters Brooklyn's put around these guys, and definitely we could see them win. Like, if the Brooklyn Nets won the championship, should anybody really be shocked? Yo, what is there, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're going to get right into things here today. So, today, we are talking about the ever-in-the-news Brooklyn Nets. Obviously, a team that has been kind of coursing through NBA news all offseason for the main reason being they have one of the best players in basketball who requested a trade this offseason. That would be Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant obviously did just recently, as we found out, resolve his issues, I guess, with the Brooklyn Nets front office. After only a couple weeks ago, us finding out that he wanted his coach and his GM fired, or he wanted himself traded after a meeting with the owner. That seems to not be the direction the Nets are going to go. Now, I would understand the firing of Steve Nash, as I think a lot of people would. I think he quite hasn't lived up to maybe what they thought he would be, like the next coming of D'Antoni or Steve Kerr or something like that. Obviously playing under D'Antoni as a player and then just being a smart-minded, all-time great point guard with a good knowledge of the game. He maybe quite hasn't connected that to coaching. There's got to be a better word for that. But, yeah, he hasn't quite moved that knowledge over exactly onto the clipboard as he did on the hardwood, right? But Brooklyn has fielded a lot of offers for Kevin Durant this offseason. That's been the main talk of pretty much any NBA sports show that you could find on planet Earth. So this is nothing new here, but I think some of the stuff that we're going to kind of look at today will be kind of how the team should look this year, some of the trade offers that we saw come through for Kevin Durant, and kind of what direction Brooklyn should be looking to go for going into the future. And then I guess taking a little look back at the past at some of these players to see how they project to work with this team, as we haven't seen some of these players like Ben Simmons, like TJ Warren, who we'll get into in a little bit, in quite a while. So I think first off I want to start off with some of the trades. Some of the trades offered for Kevin Durant are interesting. They aren't maybe the level of some people thought they would be. I think Boston still holds the best trade package in my opinion, although some of the picks that some of these teams are willing to offer is kind of absurd. You look at like a New Orleans Pelicans, I think they offered like 8 first-round picks along with CJ McCollum, an all-star player, obviously being in his 30s, a guy that they just traded for who I think works well with their team, but if you get Kevin Durant over there, what do you need CJ for? And so it's super interesting to see some of these trade packages come out. I think the amount of picks, like I said, that New Orleans came out with versus the players that like Atlanta came out with is interesting. So when we look at like Atlanta's, they offered DeAndre Hunter, they offered John Collins a pick, and another player, I think it was Jalen Johnson for salary purposes, one of their recent first-round picks, a guy from Duke who projects to be pretty decent. And then we look at like the Boston Celtics offering Jaylen Brown, I think the best player anywhere being offered, and especially potential-wise too. I think he projects to be better than DeAndre Hunter, projects to be better than John Collins, projects to be better than CJ ever was. CJ was never an all-star, and Jaylen Brown's already been one. So I think CJ is one of the biggest all-star snubs. Not snubs necessarily, but one of the best players to never make an all-star team of all time. But with that stated, Jaylen Brown is still Jaylen Brown, right? He was just the best player in the finals for a team. To get them there, not that, but in the finals, he was the best player. And then there's like the Memphis Grizzlies, who I think intrigued me the most because Jaren Jackson would be really good next to Ben Simmons. Especially if you're looking at like the projection of what Jaren Jackson should be. Obviously, we know the interior defender that Jaren Jackson is. We know the perimeter defender, or I guess even just overall defender that Ben Simmons is. He doesn't have the rim protection, but when it comes, like, he can hold his own in the post. He's big enough that he can hold his own, and he's one of, if not the best perimeter defender in all of basketball. So I think that needs to not be forgotten about him. But I think that dynamic duo on defense intrigued me a lot. But he wasn't offered. From the Memphis Grizzlies. When I first saw that they offered, I think that was the initial thought was, okay, Jaren Jackson, this might be a trade that could go through. You know what I mean? He's a guy that he could be a superstar player, right? He was drafted number 4 overall for a reason. And him not being offered was, I think, the big reason that package didn't get accepted. I think it had a lot of components to it that really worked. They put a lot of young players in it. They put like Zaire Smith, they put Xavier Tillman, Dylan Brooks. They didn't include Desmond Bane. I think smart on their part, especially if one of the big things about trading for Kevin Durant is you still need to have a competent team around him that can lead to a championship. Otherwise, you're going to be in the same situation that a lot of people view Brooklyn to be in, that Kevin Durant maybe view Brooklyn to be in, whatever it may be, you're not going to be able to keep him happy, so there's no point in trading for him if you're going to quote-unquote have to trade him. And at that point, if you just traded for him and you trade him 6 months down the line, you're not going to get as much value as we saw exactly happen with James Harden when he went to Brooklyn versus when he left Brooklyn. They did not get quite that pick return. Now, they did get Ben Simmons, but they did not quite get that pick return that they gave up to get him. And as well as players, because, I mean, they gave up Jared Allen, they gave up Karis LeVert, they gave up a lot to get him. And they didn't quite get that back. So I think a lot of teams saw that and are kind of learning from that and don't want to overjump the gun with that, which makes sense. But I think Jaren Jackson, due to his injury history and stuff like that, makes perfect sense for the Grizzlies to have included. So it intrigues me that they haven't. Maybe they're waiting, and obviously we saw Kevin Durant say that he's going to be fine with them, but who knows? During the middle of the season, we could definitely still see a trade come down. I wouldn't be shocked. But yeah, I think the offseason is going to end like a lot of people thought. I think there will be no Kevin Durant trade. And we're going to be kind of headed into the season with the current Brooklyn Nets roster. Now, to kind of speak on the current Brooklyn Nets roster, Kevin Durant, main guy, right? When we look at what he did last year, we know what he is. All-star every year than when he got injured since he was 20 years old. And last year was no different, in which he averaged almost 30 points per game. He averaged almost a steal, almost a block, 6.5 assists, and 7.5 rebounds per game. He was a superstar. Like, let's be honest here. Top 5 player in basketball. Yes, he got swept by the Celtics, but just a year removed from, I think, being on a team where a lot of people thought they would have won the championship had he had half an inch smaller toenails, right? So when you look at that, he's only one season removed from pretty much being the consensus shoe size away from champion, right? With the Brooklyn Nets. So don't forget who Kevin Durant is as well. He may be getting lowball offers a lot due to, I think, GM's getting smarter and trying to maintain the most value that they can on their roster, especially considering, Kevin Durant's history of, at this point, team hopping, right? We saw him go from OKC to Golden State to Brooklyn. And I guess if you really want to include Seattle, where he was technically drafted, but that is obviously still OKC. And so I think it does provide weary for a lot of teams, especially after having just signed an extension. So that, I think, is a lot of the reasons as well that you saw some lowball offers come in. But don't get it confused. Like, we know who he is. He's Kevin Durant. Like, you know who he is. No, yeah, when you look at the rest of the roster, though, obviously Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, when Kyrie Irving's on the court, he's one of the best players in basketball, one of, if not the best handles of all time. He's hit one of the biggest shots ever in the finals. I mean, it's Kyrie Irving, right? He comes with a lot of off-the-court drama, potential locker room issues. Okay, apparently, yeah, just speaking is not on the board today. But yeah, he comes with a lot of potential locker room issues, comes with a lot of off-the-court antics, but when he plays basketball, he's that guy. He's a top point guard in all of basketball, and that's undisputable. And then you've got shooters. You've got Seth Curry, one of the best shooters in basketball, percentage-wise, one of the best of all time. When you look at a guy like Joe Harris, I can't remember if he's going to be back from his injury or not, but he's one of the best shooters in all of basketball. You've got some defenders. We talked about Ben Simmons, all-world defensively. Obviously, Royce O'Neal, who they brought in right before the Kevin Durant trade request. They traded a first-round pick for him for a reason. Now, maybe a little bit of an over package, I guess, for him. But you were trading with Danny Ainge, so he doesn't sell for less than possible. But yeah, I mean, you got Royce O'Neal, a very solid wing defender. And then I think when you look at a guy that you had last year in your roster, you have Kessler Edwards, a guy who showed a lot of promise. I think captured a lot of NBA fans' eyes on what he could potentially do. Obviously, we'll kind of see what he can do this next season, headed into his sophomore season. But last year he averaged almost 6 points per game. He was getting half a steal and half a block, but he had a good little stretch there where he had a lot of fans kind of captivated with what he was able to do on the defensive side of the ball. And part of that comes with playing alongside Kevin Durant. You get some of that attention on you. So he was one of those guys that when the team felt super depleted last year was able to kind of help out on part of the side of the ball, right? You did lose Bruce Brown, who I thought was very good defender on the perimeter. I'm glad that my Nuggets picked him up, and I'm super excited to see what he can do for us. But you kept your interior defender. You kept Nicholas Claxton. A guy who I think is going to be very, very good this next season. Obviously, we've seen continued progression from him, going from 4 points to 6 points to 8 points. When you look at his defense, he went from pretty much no steals to almost a steal to half a steal, from a block every other game to a block and a half a game to about a block a game last year. And we've seen his rebounds increase every single year that he's been in the league as well. And so he's a guy that I definitely can see averaging 10 to 12 points this next year. He's going to be, I think he's earning the confidence and the trust of coaches. I think he's a hustle guy out there. And he is a guy that I think projects similarly to a Jared Allen. I think he has that rim protection ability. I like his switchability on the outside. I think he'd be closer to a Bam in that sense. But when I'm trying to think of centers initially for Brooklyn that he would project, it would be like, yeah, he can be your hold it down defender down low. And especially having Ben Simmons on the perimeter, like I said kind of before, that's a pretty good combo there defensively, along with some other pieces there. So I'm excited to see what we can see out of him there, but I think he's going to be a big piece for this team as well. And then the interesting part, Cam Thomas and TJ Warren. We're going to start with Cam Thomas, obviously coming off of a rookie season in which we saw him do fairly well. He averaged about 8 points per game. He averaged about half a steal, about an assist, and 2 rebounds, right? Nothing bad for a rookie there. Obviously, not being a number 1 pick or anything like that. Like, he was a 27th pick in the draft class, and he looks like he could be kind of a spark plug off the bench, you know what I mean? That microwave type of scorer. If you can get 14 points out of him this next season, I think would be super, super good. And especially when you look at him, Ben Simmons, you'll probably play him at the power forward position. Him not quite having that rim protection ability, I think you do want to move away from him being that perimeter ball handler as much as possible. You don't want him being that point guard, in which we saw, like in Philadelphia, they couldn't really run pick and rolls with their point guard because Ben Simmons couldn't run it effectively. And so I think him more as a roller, him still handling that fast break playmaking, especially with the bench unit, I think will be very intriguing. And so I think Cameron Thomas right next to him, he's kind of a microwave, can go get it off the dribble scorer, fits really well, especially when you see Ben Simmons playing with that bench unit, which I think we'll see a lot of, considering some of the microwave scorers they could potentially have there, with Cameron Thomas being one of them. And then Basketball Reference projects him to average almost 18 points per game, and projects his percentages to go up. I don't think he'll get to 18 points per game. I do think his 3-point percentage is a little bit on the rough side right now. It's at 27% for this last season and 43% overall from the field. I'd like to see him get a little bit closer to 45% from the field. And if we can get him to a 33% shooter, I think that's, as a microwave scorer, you're shooting a lot of them. Now, last year it was only about 2.6 per game. He was just a rookie, but that was a third of his attempts per game that he was shooting were 3-pointers pretty much. It was actually a little over a third. So if we can get that percentage up a little bit more, I think that will also just innately help that scoring. So who knows? Maybe he could catapult into a high teen score. I don't quite see it with some of the other guys on this roster, because remember, Ben Simmons, he's going to get about 15. Like I said, I think Claxton can increase his scoring a little bit. We already have Kevin Durant on the roster. You got Kyrie Irving. So there's a lot that's going to be going on there. So I'd like to see him kind of get in that mid-teens and just be that microwave scorer for them. But if he isn't able to do that, a guy that might be able to do that is TJ Warren. Bubble Warren, Mr. 50-piece, whatever you want to call him. We haven't seen him in a little while. He started his career off in Phoenix. Maybe wasn't the guy that we thought he could be there, but he was a solid player. Got traded to Indiana for a bag of chips due to Phoenix's owner being cheap, and balled out, right? He was one of their best players on the roster, especially when we look at him playing in the bubble. He went ballistic in the bubble. Was one of the best players on the planet when he was playing in the bubble, but we haven't seen him since. And so it's kind of interesting, right? We'll see how he comes back from his injuries, playing only 4 games in the 2020-2021 season, where he averaged 15 points per game, and then playing no games this last season. Hopefully he's had enough time to kind of come off of that foot injury. He's kind of got a prove-it deal this year, because if I check, pretty sure he's only on a 1-year deal for not a ton of money. So a super solid pickup for them in that sense, especially when you're looking at a guy that could give you potentially 20 points per game. I mean, his highest is 19.8, but that's pretty much 20 points per game. And as, a potential guy that could start, could come off the bench, dependent on lineups, who's healthy, stuff like that. provide some, potential load management ability for Kevin Durant throughout the regular season if you want to keep him healthy for the playoffs, which we've seen he shows out in the playoffs regardless how much he's playing in the regular season. So maybe instead of it being injuries keeping him out during the regular season, you work on maybe more of a Kawhi type of thing where he plays 60 games, but he's healthy all 60 instead of playing 50, 60 games, but he's only healthy for the 50, 60 games of those regular season, which I think would then directly translate into the playoffs where we would see him continue to be Kevin Durant, one of the best players on the planet. So TJ Warren provides a lot of versatility for this team if he can be what he was in Indiana, or even that 15-point per game scorer. If he's coming off the bench or starting, I think that's a huge get for this team. He's not going to do a lot of playmaking, but as a go off the dribble scorer, kind of in motion with the offense type of scorer, I think he can do that. Obviously, his 3-point percentage drastically jumped his last year in Phoenix, and once he went to Indiana, he went from being like a 20% shooter from 3 in Phoenix to shooting over 40% his last year there, and shooting 40% his full year pretty much in Indiana. And so I think he's had injury issues throughout his career. He's never played more than 67 games, but as a guy that you're not necessarily relying on to be one of your top players, and as a guy that whatever he gives you is a bonus, I think is huge for this team. And like I said, I think could provide a lot of lineup versatility and options for this team, especially throughout the regular season. And then in the postseason, to just have another guy that can go get a bucket, I think could be interesting. Now, TJ Warren could absolutely come out and just be Lance Stevenson and kind of terrible. For another Pacers reference, I guess. Like, post being on the Pacers, not a great player. Now, we did see Lance kind of reclaim his spot in the league this last season on the Pacers, so shout out to Lance for that and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, there's a potential where TJ Warren just isn't that guy anymore. Foot injuries obviously can, hurt a lot of your movement and stuff like that, but it's not the worst injury that there is in basketball. Obviously, we've seen guys like Michael Porter Jr. have spine injuries. We've seen guys like Kevin Durant and Derrick Rose have ACL or MCL injuries. Lots of guys have more severe injuries than a foot injury. Regardless of how severe the foot injury is, typically that's not going to be the most severe injury that you can get in basketball. And so I think, TJ Warren definitely could be an X factor for this team headed towards playoffs and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, this is an overall pretty solid roster. One of the better rosters I think they've put around him. Not having that James Harden height of talent necessarily, other than Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, but still, for the rest of the team, it's more well-rounded. It's more, if you had kept Karis LeVert and kept Jared Allen, this is, I think, more closer to what that team would have been, and I think that team would have been better than eventually what they had, which was almost a championship team with James Harden. I think overall, around the stars, I think it would have been better, and for regular season success as well, which I think is a big thing, right? We obviously saw them have to face the Celtics in the first round due to not a complete, but a lack of regular season success, and also the Celtics' lack of regular season success as well, in which if, Brooklyn is the 1 seed, well, they get the Miami Heat's path to the conference finals instead of having to go through a much harder path. And so I think that's something very important that is overlooked. It's just the regular season, but when it comes down to it, it gets you seeding, it gets you the ability to kind of not necessarily have a rest round. You're playing a playoff team in the NBA. We've seen, Hakeem Olajuwon, he was the 6th seed and made the NBA Finals. We've seen teams that aren't the favorites upset the other teams and make it all the way. But in terms of a load that you're going to have to carry, if the rest of your team can do better without you during the regular season, and you can play a lesser team potentially in the playoffs, that only makes it easier for a superstar player, right? And so I think Brooklyn's promising for this next season. I definitely think there is still that possibility that we see Kevin Durant moved. Now I think a Scotty Barnes, a Jaren Jackson, or more, maybe they take the offer from the Celtics at that point, because I do think the Celtics have a compelling offer, just having Jaylen Brown in there. But I don't know. It's definitely possible he's moved, but if not, this is one of the most competitive rosters Brooklyn's put around these guys. And definitely, we could see them win. If the Brooklyn Nets won the championship, should anybody really be shocked? No, they have Kevin Durant. Now, we'll look back and it'll be kind of a hilarious saga of, wow, the whole offseason we just spent talking about this guy getting traded and he went to win the NBA Finals. What does that do for his legacy and stuff like that, right? But it'll also kind of be, hey, look, could you really discredit the guy at the end of the day? So I guess at the end of the video, I should, throw in, I am a Kevin Durant fan, so him wanting out of Brooklyn didn't entirely make sense to me. But shoot, if I could have got him on the Nuggets, who did make a call for him, I wouldn't have complained. And yeah, I mean, I felt like I should throw that out. So I have a little bit of bias there. I've talked about this in videos before, so if you guys haven't seen them, make sure you guys go check those out. Again, recording with the new mic, so hopefully it sounds good. We're going to keep it going like that. And yeah, let me know what you guys think down below. How good do you think the Brooklyn Nets can be? Do you think they can win the championship? Do you think Kevin Durant is going to get traded? And what is Ben Simmons going to look like on the court? Because really, I think we have no idea until we see it. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you guys drop a like, subscribe for more, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out, guys.